Hi, I'm Charlie, and this is Ben. But hey,
We could go with that.
yeah, there we go. One of the things I was really interested in talking about was I think that we look at the concept of targeting on Facebook probably a little bit differently, and so I would love to be able to chat with you here and kind of ask you more about the way you're looking at it, and really get down to the bottom of why you're doing it that way, and maybe present some of the way that I'm thinking about it, and at least there can be somebody to be a fly on the wall between two folks that have been teaching for a long time and have quite a bit of experience in the different ways that they think about it. And I think that is an opportunity that a lot of people don't get. And so why not bring it to them?
Sure.
The first thing right out of the gate, just, your last video, let's just start there because it's your most recent thing. So most top of mind, let's go with that.
Sure.
It was, how to retarget, and you were talking about site traffic and engagements and followers and video views. I'll be honest, I don't do much retargeting at all, but I'm curious as to one, just how you feel about retargeting in the ecosystem, and then people can dive into more about how to do it, but what you find the most value, and maybe last point of how you define that value when you're tuning audiences, when you're running ads.
Yeah, so just retargeting in general, we have to say that it's less effective than it used to be pre-iOS 14.5. We still do a lot of retargeting. I'd say for most clients, there's going to be, a retargeting ad set in a campaign or a retargeting campaign within that. So typically, it's where we're going to see our best results on, say, a cost per purchase, cost per lead basis, depending on what we're advertising. I know you typically don't do a lot of retargeting. Well, from what I understand, is you're more going to do open targeting, and a lot of those people are going to be captured within everyone that's available, right? And they're going to be sort of by default retargeted. I think there's a lot of merit to that. I think where I like to specify some retargeting would be, well, we like to do that with most clients anyway. I feel there's a little downside to doing so. But I think where it becomes particularly important is in ad accounts where you're advertising something where building that relationship with the prospect becomes more and more important. So is it as important with, say, a low value e-commerce business? And by low value, I mean the products that you're selling, not necessarily the business itself.
Right, of course. Like something that's 20p,
yeah. It's not going to be as important in that, right?
Yeah.
But if we're advertising, a $20,000 service, I think the opportunity there is, and sort of the need for it really, to get multiple exposures of whatever it is that you provide to your prospect is there. And I think that with retargeting, we're able to do that more accurately and be more confident that we're going to hit those people again and again.
I got you. So with, you call it open, with respect to open targeting and how it's going to be, as you said, kind of doing it by anyway, but less focused. Is it the lack of focus on those individuals that is really the pain point? So the lack of the ability to control the funnel that is what you're trying to fix for?
Yeah, I think it would be control, not necessarily the funnel, because I'm not the biggest fan of they have to do step A, step B, step C, that sort of thing. But I think when we specifically retarget, we can be more confident we're reaching people, perhaps with ads that don't immediately lead to a purchase or sale. If I think about the typical campaigns that we're running where we're using a lot of open targeting, we'll be running a sales campaign, let's say, and we're looking for those purchases. A lot of the times when we're running ads to retargeting audiences, we might be looking to do something with virtually no expectation that someone's going to take an action there and then. And I feel like if we were to leave that open, it's like, what are we really optimizing for here? We could just end up reaching anyone. Whereas if we're really specific with, okay, we're only going to retarget our email list or people who visited our website in the last 180 days, something like that. And we want to put this demonstration video of how our service is delivered, or this customer testimonial in there. Now, we might, depending on the business we're advertising, we might think someone's only going to go for this service when they're ready. They're not going to be interested until perhaps their life circumstances are there. I get a good classic example. You run an ad campaign for, say, like a divorce lawyer, right? There'll be people watching that content. Maybe they've checked out someone's website who, their marriage is a little bit rocky and they're sort of thinking, but they're not going to pull the trigger until, that's what they're actually doing. They are actually sort of separated and they've decided with their partner, okay, this is done. So in those circumstances, if we're retargeting those people, we're not going to be able to generate a lead until their life circumstances are ready. And we want to be able to put stuff in front of them again and again that means that when they are ready, that's the only business they want to work with. So that's the logic there. And that's quite a specific case, but I think with a lot of, particularly with service-based businesses, that becomes more and more important.
No, I get that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's about, I mean, ultimately, I think the concept of retargeting and narrowing your focus and being is the focus is the priority of being top of mind when the decision needs to get made. And so that when somebody says, all right, I'm looking for this thing, you're the thing that they're like, all right, I'm not looking for this thing. I'm looking for this person or this service or this company to do it for me.
Yeah.
In a retargeting audience, let's say, I mean, what do you think is a typical conversion rate of a retargeting audience? If I have 1,000 people in a retargeting audience, how many people might buy?
I mean, I think it's going to depend on there's so many variables there, right? So it depends on the price of the product. You know, there's tons that go into that. How warm is that audience, right? So, you know, there's warm audiences and then there's warm audiences. And someone who visited your website for 30 seconds 4 months ago is nothing in comparison to someone that watches everything you put out on Instagram, for example.
Sure. And then different than somebody that added to cart yesterday and all of those things.
Yeah.
Let's say if I have a retargeting audience where 25% of those individuals are interested in what I'm doing, then I would also, my point to the unit economics is that retargeting audience is probably going to be more expensive, right? Like, let's say broad audience is, for the purpose of this conversation, let's call it a 20-pound CPM. And a retargeting audience is let's say 40-pound CPM, just to keep it hyperbolic and simple for the example. In that case, one of my pain points is I'm investing more money at a higher cost per inventory and a higher frequency, creating negative experience for people sort of at scale. So if I know 3 out of 4 people don't want to see my advertising and I'm paying more money to reach them, what I've noticed in talking with engineers and product stuff, and I'm curious if you've seen some of a similar thing or how you feel about it, is that ultimately our job in Facebook is to help the machine give end users a positive experience, right? Like, I'm sure you've heard the term, like the average person swipes the height of the Eiffel Tower on a daily basis. And so my issue isn't so much in trying to control the funnel, because I definitely believe in that. I definitely understand that you want to be top of mind, not controlling the funnel. And I believe in how you're thinking about it too. I think we're on the same page. I think my concern is that I'm investing a portion of my budget, 10%, 30%, whatever the business happens to be. It could be 50%, who knows? But I'm investing a considerable portion of my budget specifically creating a majority of negative experiences for the Facebook user. And in my experience, that tends to raise my cost of advertising, even for my top of funnel efforts. And I'm wondering if you've seen the same thing, or if you've thought about it that way, or if yes, you have, and you know what, the cost benefit analysis completely pays off.
Yeah, I think I would lean more towards that last point that you made, that I would be okay with annoying a good chunk of the audience if we feel we can drive sales from the remainder that are interested. I think I completely understand what you're saying. I think for me, where I would come down as to whether I would, you know, completely buy into that versus not would be, what are we advertising?
Okay.
So I think that would make a big difference. So if, for example, we were running a 3-day flash sale for a business that has, let's say, large warm audiences, but is relatively new to Facebook and Instagram advertising, so they don't have a lot in their ad account yet, not built up. In that sort of circumstances, I would want to be pretty retargeting heavy in terms of the budget split. We're going to hit the people that have already bought or already interacted. We're going to hit them hard. There's not, I don't have enough faith in Meta's targeting systems for them to be able to find those people during that sort of time period. So in that sort of scenario, I'd be very nervous, just sort of trusting it, that it would find those people or find the people within the warm audiences that are willing to purchase exclusively. But, you know, if we were running like a more sort of stable campaign that's being run over a long time period, I can completely understand what you mean. Like, why burn out some of your best prospects? Why annoy some of the people that have already shown an interest? That makes complete sense. I think there are circumstances, often with service-based businesses, where we're not I want to force that they know how we do things, because I know that helps with the conversion. I want to force certain things. I want to force that they're going to see some client testimonials, because I know that when that business's sales team gets on the phone with them, they're probably more likely to convert. It might help with subsequent metrics. Whereas, yeah, if we're, certain things, I'm on the same page.
Yeah. So what I'm getting here then is really that for you, at least, you'd rather, like you said, force those impressions, force those ads onto people to make sure that they're top of mind. And I guess the way that I view it, just kind of wrap this up, is that if I'm forcing my impressions onto people, knowing that in this case, 75% of the people that I reach have already kind of made a decision to say no, so it's a negative experience, but to your point, the economy of scale might pan out. My concern is less in the people that I'm upsetting, the 750 out of the 1,000 that I'm upsetting, and more in the fact that my cost to reach the other 20, 50, 200 million people is going to go up, because I've given the signal to Facebook and my advertiser score and my relationship with them as a business partner that I am invested and creating a negative experience for their users. And my other pain point to that is I think where you have lack of faith in Facebook's ability to find the right individuals that are warm in that audience, I think I look at it more as I have a lot of confidence in their ability to understand who wants to see my type of content. And I have way more confidence in that than I do that my audience is inclusive of those people to a fullest extent. And that, somebody might have ad blocking, somebody might be signed up with a different email address, the right person might not have, gone on Instagram, whatever the case is. I look at that retargeting audience more as a 99.9% exclusion that raises my cost of advertising across the board.
It's an interesting thought, and I can completely understand the logic. And you are going to pay higher CPMs to reach a retargeting audience than you are a broader audience. So I completely understand that. And
I guess my point is my broad audience cost per CPMs goes up because I'm running retargeting.
Sure, yeah, well, that's likely to happen as well. Yeah. I think that makes sense. And I think there's some logic to following through, through what you said. Okay, you do this, it's going to have a negative impact on here. I guess it all boils down to what you're looking to optimize for. So, for example, I would be completely on board with what you just described if we were advertising content to build an audience.
Okay.
Like if that was the end objective, okay, that was what I'd want to do. Because that user experience is going to be the absolute most important thing. But if, for example, we're advertising something relatively expensive and the primary objective was something like lead quality, which, would be a concern that a lot of clients will raise, then by sort of forcing, ad impressions of client testimonials, how the service is delivered, videos that show people who had a nightmare situation just like your potential prospects have, that sort of stuff. By forcing those impressions, it's going to cost more sort of within the ad campaign, but we might see better results on the conversion, particularly if there's like a sales team involved because they've been pre-prepared. So that wouldn't apply to an e-commerce business necessarily. I mean, it could if it was a high value e-commerce product. You might see a higher percentage between add to carts and purchase or something along those lines. But I think that's where I would differentiate between the different type of thing. I'd be less concerned about Facebook doesn't necessarily want me to do it this way, and more like, no, I want this person to see this thing before my sales guy gets on the phone, because they're going to more like to convert. Would probably be where I draw the line on that.
No, that makes sense. And so you're really moving to that push towards qualitative. I guess my final concern about that is just that feels like a depreciating investment, and that ultimately I'm optimizing down. And that's just hearing you explain it.
Yeah.
It feels like I'm optimizing down, and I'm optimizing. My cost to bring new people into the funnel goes up over time.
Yeah.
And my hope is that the quality of people I get in my funnel also goes up. But one of my concerns is at some point, we're going to reach an inflection point where the cost of inventory rises while the conversion rate rises, but it means that it ultimately becomes the cost benefit analysis of getting a sales call booked.
Yeah.
Ultimately gets to be undesirable, because in that scenario that you described, we're basically accepting that our net cost of advertising will more or less increase, even at a small rate, over time. Because if we know that what we're doing is going to raise our broad targeting, at some point, do we think that rise in price is going to be, well, if I do it, it's going to be 25, and if I don't do it, it'll be a 20? Or is it, if I do it, it'll be a 25, and then 3-4 months later, it might be a 27, 3-4 months later, it might be a 30. Again, being hyperbolic for the purpose of this conversation. Yeah. And that at some point, even if I had take that out to the nth degree, even if I had 100% conversion rate, I would have my sales team sitting around not answering phone calls. Like, does that make sense? And that the cost of inventory and the conversion rate ultimately leads me to a point where it becomes too expensive to book a call. Versus I'm draining the funnel and optimizing it more effectively than I'm filling it up. And that becomes a depreciating asset is I guess the way that I'm looking at the situation you've described.
Yeah. So I think theoretically that could happen. I've never seen it, because I don't think you'd ever reach those levels. So there's a few factors going on. Firstly, your audience is going to, depending on your other marketing efforts, if we're talking about retargeting specifically, that audience is going to refresh itself to some extent. There's going to be ins and outs. So that helps prolong that. And also, I don't think we'd ever say reach a saturation point or get to the point where our retargeting audience was a large enough proportion of the overall target market where it then continues to just see the other cold audience targeting prices go up and up. Like, we just never really get there. And if we did, unless it was something really, really specific, I think the business would have generated so many leads and so much business that would be sort of a, we've milked this one dry kind of effect, and we need to come up with a whole new offer anyway. So I understand the logic in theory. I would say we've not experienced that. We've not hit that critical mass to get to that point. I
got you. Yeah. I agree the critical mass there is probably going to be tough. I guess my point is that if we run retargeting, our broad targeting will go up in price. Eventually, we're just having our open targeting go up over time, no matter what. And if our retargeting audience is always 5,000 people, and our cost to fill it rises every couple of weeks, every couple of months, every year, the efficiency within that retargeting to close somebody has to get better and better and better, or I'm going to basically price myself out of the market. I think that's more of the point that I think I'm trying to get to, the way that I'm looking at this.
Yeah. So if I give an example business, the way I would sort of think about that, if I think of the businesses where I'm like, okay, we really need the retargeting, it's going to be really important, they're nearly always going to have very high average customer values. Like, we will retarget as well with other types of businesses, but where I think the ones that are like, okay, we need this because no one's going to commit to a $30,000 service if they haven't had those exposures. So I think what we typically find with those businesses is that the cost of customer acquisition, actually, the advertising cost as a proportion of what they generate is relatively small.
Sure.
And they may spend more on a sales team to get in fact, often will, if they pay on commissions or whatever, than it was to generate the equivalent leads that were necessary to generate that sale. So, even if we had what you're describing, and let's say over, the next, I'm trying to give a somewhat realistic time frame. It's even over the next 5 years.
If we say the CPMs year over year are going to rise, continue. If we're going to assume the statement that I see all the time that, well, cost on advertising just goes up on Facebook every year.
Yeah. I don't think we would see a large enough percentage increase for those sorts of businesses where it would be like a deal breaker.
Got it.
I think a lot of those, you might need to 10x your lead cost in order for them to be like, we can't do this anymore.
Okay.
And therefore, that would just, unless there's real shifts in like the overall cost.
Got it. So in these situations, the margin of unit economics allows such an investment because that's your business model. That is your low cost trigger. Whereas in, for instance, beauty products, you might get something landed for 78 cents, you sell for $200, and all of your margin, instead of on the sales team, goes to the advertising. Like, there's always some thing that where you get your bread and butter made. I got it. So it's really for those business models where the cost per acquisition of the attention leaves so much margin that you're less concerned about it because there's something else going on in the business, whether it's, in this use case, a sales team or sales calls where you're getting it. I got you. Yeah.
Those are the scenarios where I really feel like retargeting is very important. We will retarget in other scenarios. We will retarget for e-commerce businesses and things like that. Part of that might be that we just couldn't bring ourselves to not, like, we'd be unwilling to take that risk on a client account because we know that retargeting audience is going to deliver results. It's in those scenarios that I'd be very interested to test your theory. Obviously, it's sometimes difficult with client accounts because it's like, well, we're going to run this experiment on your account. They're like, hang on. I'd like to see what you've done for the last 3 years, you know? Yeah,
and then you also face the issue of Facebook's a machine learning algorithm. You've invested heavily in teaching it. Think of it as an employee. You've invested heavily in teaching that employee to do a job very well. And now you're getting another employee that doesn't know how to do it nearly to the same level of efficiency. So there's an investment. And if we assume the cost rising, this scenario where it potentially could be a depreciating investment, but that's okay because the margin is large enough, the requirement it would take to invest and develop the appreciating asset that goes up in value might be, you know, you might not have the clients around long enough or get them to buy into like, let's change everything. Makes total sense. And that's why I love it, because I think what you're talking about is a real agency scenario, or when you're doing it for somebody, or even marketers doing it for themselves. You know, what is the cost benefit analysis of changing lanes, right? Of thinking about things differently. And you know, that's one of the big things that I see is when I tell people, you know, and I'm interested to hear about top of funnel stuff too, but when I get to people to broad targeting only, you know, one of the things I see people do all the time, it's a big mistake, is they just turn off everything they have and they run broad and they're like, well, this is way less efficient. And then they say it doesn't work. And the reason two things. One, like we're talking about training the machine to do the job really well. But two, I think the way that people measure their results is, I find that people do that in a way that is fairly flawed, and that I don't know, most marketers I talk to don't look at the incremental lift of their advertising. Instead, they're looking at the results by ad or by ad set or by campaign. I got into something with one of our friends in the Twitter sphere and YouTubers, and it was interesting. He said something along the lines of, I spent $1,000 on this ad and it had a ROAS of X. What should I do?
Yeah.
And my response was, well, what was the impact on your business? And their response was, well, we don't have any way of measuring what this ad's impact is on the rest of our business. And my reply to that is, well, then you don't have any data in order to make that determination. Because your CPA, your ROAS, isn't necessarily incremental sales volume, incremental revenue. You might have something that's really, really good at a CPA. And I appreciate that you're talking about cost per lead, cost per acquisition as a KPI here. But one of my concerns when people go to broad, and it was interesting when I was at this conference, I had this conversation about 5 times at a table in like 2 hours. I was like, literally one person sat down, the next person asked the same question, and I sort of like on a carousel said the same thing over and over again, which is great, you know? They said, well, it doesn't work, but my business is doing great if I could only figure out Facebook. And my response to them was, you went broad. Facebook said you made, let's be hyperbolic, no sales, but your revenue keeps going up. What's happening to your search? What's happening to your organic traffic? What's happening to your email open rates and value per email when you're running broad, where you're asking Facebook to amplify your business instead of deliver you direct results? And almost to the person, let's say to the man, but there's more women actually asking that question than men, which was exciting to talk to more and more people about this. But almost every one of them said that going that route ultimately they noticed a lift in revenue in their business, even though Facebook looked worse. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious I've seen more about ad options and retargeting, and I get it too. I'm looking at your YouTube and Instagram stuff, so you're getting the things that you're teaching out because we're also trying to get attention. So with that being said, I'm curious about how you feel about targeting options or the funnel, or more importantly, how you're measuring the results of the work that you're doing. Instead, is it just purely on a cost per action basis, or are you measuring it against the impact of the entire business?
I think that's one of those things that is probably one of the harder things that you have to deal with when you have an agency running stuff for clients, is that I will actually take quite a different approach for my own marketing than we will for our clients, because I will take more of what you described, a longer term approach. What is this doing overall? How are we doing overall? Not necessarily tracking every little thing. And, if I'm running ads for my own services or whatever, I'm not necessarily, okay, I'm trying to track through every single, oh, I ran a retargeting ad and it got me this many new leads. But okay, yeah, but if we just compare this month to when I was running the ads to last month when I wasn't, we're up significantly more, which is exactly what you described. Very hard to do with a lot of clients. Clients just aren't going to, I think actually a lot of clients just won't believe you. They'll sort of think that you're trying to over exaggerate the results you're delivering. So when we are running for clients, we are going to be more focused on the specific, how many leads do we generate? What did they cost? How many sales did we generate? What did they cost? And I would like to take a longer term approach. And some of them are okay with that, but not all. The best case scenario often is that you start off being like, look, we got you a 30% improvement in your ROAS. And you work with them on that basis for a year, and then they start trusting you a little bit more. But yeah, so I think that's a division. I often have this come up with like my video editors when I'm sort of creating videos, and they'll often want to use like snippets of some things that I do marketing my own business in like videos. And I say, oh, can we use this? And I'm like, well, the only thing is that's likely to pay off in 2 to 3 years time. And I'm not sure that many people are that interested in finding out about stuff that's going to pay off. For me, I'm happy to do that in my own business. But as if I'm like, teaching it or showing clients, not everyone's got that patience. So I completely agree. But yeah, it's just a different setup, I think, sometimes. So you have to do to keep people happy.
I got you. So it's more of a client education issue. Like if we could get it, more people to appreciate that what we're trying to do is, instead of taking credit for a larger piece of the pie, make the pie bigger.
Yeah. And if they believe you, great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think it's interesting that, I've seen some people present reporting that makes this fairly straightforward. And I've seen other people that are very much focused and very much insist that what they need to do is spend X at X ROAS so that they can get more money. And that's their definition of success. And so what I'm hearing, phrase a different way, and let me see if you agree, is that you might have to say the definition of success is spend X money at X ROAS because that's the client need. But you as the marketer appreciate that ultimately that's not the biggest version of a goal. That's not really where you would like to go if you could get them to buy in for the whole way.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. Yeah, that is absolutely correct. I would rather people have that approach, and that's the approach I take with my own business. Given that I operate within an ads industry, the fact that I put so much time and effort into organic content and have done for 7 years now, that speaks to my own marketing. I'm going to take a longer term focus. And the first, 75, 100 YouTube videos I created did basically nothing, but they're laying the foundations that then builds the audience that then produces. So it's like trying to talk a client into that would be very, very difficult, but I can do it myself. So yeah, we have clients that are absolutely insistent on every single sale being attributed to one platform, because they'll be running multiple stuff and they want to know exactly where it comes from. And I often try and have to tell them, like, okay, imagine this scenario. Someone sees a Facebook ad, they click on it. 3 days later, they remember the name, they Google it. They go in, they're about to purchase, they don't manage it because they're waiting in line. A couple of days later, they see a display ad on YouTube. They click on that and they come to, and you could just keep going down the line on things that they do. And it's like, who gets that sale, right? Like what platform? Well, they probably all had a hand in making that thing happen. But there are those that just want to, they want it because they want to be able to take a look at all the various agencies or departments within their company that are doing things and go, you're producing this and you're costing this, and you're producing this and you're costing this. But like with any business, any positive profile raising of the company, the brand, or the main, let's say it's like a person-led company, the personal brand of that person is going to deliver massive returns over time. But yeah, as I said, not many people have that approach.
I got you. Yeah, I agree with that. I always tell people the average customer journey is weeks or decades long. You didn't buy your car because of the salesperson at the car dealership, right? They're basically just they're a cashier more often than not. And the problem is every customer journey profile is different, right? You and I might buy the exact same thing, but that touch point of the Facebook ad and the YouTube ad and the search and the email are all wildly different. So it's effectively impossible to truly model each individual customer journey to say who gets credit for what. And I hear you on the pain point of trying to get the client to buy into that. And I think that's a pain point a lot of people have, although I love that for you, it's an appreciation of that's how we should be looking at it.
Yeah.
Although maybe that's not how we can get, our clients aren't there yet to appreciate that that's what we're doing. And I think that's a very real world example of you as a business are getting clients and this is what they're asking for. So you're delivering it, even though what they're asking for might not be exactly what they need, but you're also helping their business in general. And hey, at the end of the day, people are giving you their money to do a job. Your job is to deliver on what they need. And we can't all be completely blue sky altruistic with our end goals because, food costs money. Absolutely. Like, I get that. I guess very interesting. Yeah. Cause I found that one of the first things that I try to do is explain the concept of incremental lift. And I show people the shape of the curve and the level of impact that any marketing channel has on something else. And one of the reasons that I try to have a very simple ad account is because it means that Facebook, if I can get the entire ad account, say, down to one campaign, running at CBO, it becomes very easy for me to say, I've got a 10% margin on my target CPA. I'm allowed to spend 50 to get there. I'm at 45. I know that I could increase my budget by 11%, even if I don't get any other attributed sales to this channel. I don't make any sales across the business, and I'm still at my goal, which means that managing each individual channel becomes incredibly simple. And I find that managing that bigger piece is usually a goal. I guess with that in mind, just before we head out, I always teach people that my optimal Facebook ad account setup is basically a single campaign with an ad set targeting broad with my winning post IDs and one or two dynamic creatives. Putting into there to give Facebook better quality options for me as an advertiser to provide content that meets their business needs of attracting attention. So that ultimately I'm improving my CPMs over time. And Facebook effectively gives me also something we didn't talk about, but I'm getting the second ad in the feed, not the ad that shows up 15 minutes into a doom scroll because I'm a higher quality advertiser. Not only is my inventory cheaper, but my quality is better. So with that being said, do you feel like there is an optimal Facebook ad account setup or someplace you're trying to get most of your clients to, or is it very specific on the client?
It's going to be dependent on what the client is offering, I feel. I would say that most of our client accounts are going to follow a very simple structure that's pretty similar to what you described. It's going to normally have a little bit more going on targeting wise, but I would say the cold audience targeting option that is most likely to produce the best results for us is going to be broad targeting. So like, I'm by no means against broad targeting. We use it all the time. But I don't think it's the right tool for every business to have that sort of setup. I do believe in simpler account structures. I first started advertising on Facebook at the end of 2013, and sort of 2014, 2015, it was all about the 9-step. Video A, video B, video C, video, And I was always a bit skeptical of that, and that's certainly not something that we would set up, anymore. So we would have a simpler structure. I do think that one of the big advantages of simpler structures, beyond it's not a bad setup at all to go with like what you described. I think in some circumstances you're going to see better results with something different. But I think one of the things that does do is it does really focus the mind, right? It focuses the mind on the parts that are going to be more important to your success on the platform, which is going to be what you're offering and the ads themselves, you know, the parts that people actually see. But there are other businesses where I think I would, you know, you mentioned FIFA, and I think for me that would be a good analogy. And I would think about it as like, depending on which team you're using, let's say you're trying to win a tournament, different teams have different strengths, and therefore you're going to want to play in a slightly different style depending on, right, we've got really fast wingers, or if we got, you know, guy up front that can score. So there's all sorts of stuff like that. So I would say different businesses need different different sales funnel structures, and then that informs the ad account. So like we said, with the really high-end service providers, I'm going to force some impressions on certain stuff, because if we're advertising, you know, a home remodeling business and their average customer value is $250,000, we don't care if the cost per lead doubles or triples. We want that quality. So
sure. In that use case, you're smashing retargeting aggressively because the margin is allowing you to do it.
Exactly that. Yeah. Whereas with other businesses, you know, if we're selling $20 e-commerce products, no, we're not gonna do that at all.
One thing that you said here, I just would love to close out on, is saying that broad targeting might not always be the way for the interest of top of funnel and filling the funnel and prospecting. So I'm curious for you what those other options might look like.
So we'll still use the range of cold audience targeting that, you know, people have used for years and we've used for years. We will still occasionally use interest-based targeting, and we will still use lookalikes. Often the way we will structure a campaign when we first start working with a client, particularly if it's a relatively newish ad account, let's say, we almost never work with someone who's not run any ads before. They've got proof of concept, which is good. Is we might create, you know, multiple targeting options and run them simultaneously. Run a broad targeting option, an interest, or two lookalikes, and we will often go with the ones that we see produce the best results. Now we will retest, because we know as an account matures, we're likely to see better results with the broader options. But we will often test like that, and we still do see some accounts perform better not with a broad targeting option, and that's measured on a pretty short-term cost per conversion basis usually. It's definitely shifting over time. Like, we wouldn't use broad hardly at all, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and it's definitely going more and more that way. Like, more and more often we see that be the best performing targeting option, but not always, not yet.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I was in the biz about 5 years, and then I was part of the disruptor group, and Power 5 came out, and I was like, I didn't trust broad, and it took me about 6-9 months to like make the switch in, I don't know, 2018, 2019, something like that. So I totally hear you, especially that timeline. That sounds very familiar. I guess I'll finish with this, and just kind of curious about your question on it, and then we can wrap up, is on the efforts of interest groups and lookalikes. For me, I've found that my confidence in Facebook's data and what it's labeled to leverage might not be the best. And I think everybody can kind of feel that way. So with respect to an interest group, you know, I know that the interest group team at Facebook basically there hasn't been an engineer there in a long time. So it's a software that's kind of set up. And I know that it's not 100% tracking to this person actually is defined well as an interest group and not. And talking about something doesn't necessarily imply positive or negative sentiment or intent. And so for me, that's always been if 1/3 of this audience is here by mistake, and half the people in this audience feel negatively about something, and then half the people that feel positively might have buying intent, I've gotten it down to maybe 1/6, 1/4 of that audience is actionable for me. And I know that I'm paying extra to reach them, because you were in Facebook back in the day when they showed you how much each one of those additional audiences, the Datalogix is going to add $1. This interest group is 28 cents, and they've hid that. I don't feel like the kids that's got in 2018 that are the new, you know, agency owners, because they got really good when it was a bull market, understand all of that. But then also when it comes to a lookalike, like, I've turned to view a 1% lookalike as effectively a 99% exclusion. And I'm doing that basically saying, Facebook, here's data. I don't necessarily trust your data. So I'm going to give you data of 1,000, maybe 10,000 people or more. I don't necessarily trust your ability, how you view this information, but please use it. And of that 10,000 email addresses I upload, maybe it actually matches 7,000 or 6,000 because some don't match up and all of that stuff. To then extrapolate out a 98% exclusion for my audience, that costs me extra. That depreciates in value. I guess that's my pain point. So I'm curious, one, if you're thinking about it that way, or two, if you do, and honestly, just the way that you've seen the results, maybe from what you're saying is initially I get better results, but over time I move away from it. Is that sort of what you're saying?
That does happen. Yeah. So I think again, what you said in theory is correct. But when we launch new campaigns, we still do see, let's say over the first 14 days, we still do see better results sometimes with lookalike audiences or interests or other detailed targeting options as opposed to going broad. The percentage of the time where we see it during those 2 weeks, the percentage of the time where we see broad not being the best option during those 2 weeks is decreasing. So like it is becoming more likely that it's going to be the best option from day one. And I think that's going to continue to happen. We're going to see it go more and more that way. But we still see it. And whilst we still continue to see that, we're going to sort of be led by the data within that client's account and go that way. But yeah, we will retest because we know that as that account matures, as we get more conversions registered in it, we are more likely to move towards broad options. That is, and there's rarely going to be an account, like let's say we're not a high-end service advertiser here. We're advertising a lower end service, a digital business, an e-commerce business, something like that. Once that account has generated, let's say, thousands of conversions, we're almost certainly going to be broad targeting at that point.
What I love about that is there is the blue sky perfect architecture from day one, and then the practical application of how we start and then build a bridge to get to where we might want to go. And it seems like you and I ultimately have the same end goal, just maybe how we get there is, like you said on FIFA, maybe a slightly different setup, which I think is great. And I think that's really great information, because at the end of the day, I think people don't often get to see us talk about the entire journey. And if it takes 2 weeks to get that account to set up, and also if I know that I'm running lookalikes and interest groups against broad is going to have all the low-hanging fruit stolen by those other audiences. But as I deprecate more and more of those, broads get smarter and smarter, and eventually I just transition to completely that. Which sounds like
and we're trying to manage that client relationship. We do not want, particularly when we start working with a client and they've run campaigns before, we know it's important to get them something early doors, because if we come in and we say, look, your results are going to get worse, they're going to be better in 3 months' time or whatever time frame it is, that's not normally something that they'll tolerate. So we're trying to manage that client relationship, and if we can get that improvement in results over the next 2 to 4 weeks when we first start, then we'll take that, because I think that helps set everyone up a little bit better emotionally within the process.
I love that. It's a great structure, and that communication, I think, is very key in setting those expectations, giving them like maybe a 90-day window for everything. Well, Ben, I know we're a little bit over here, and I do appreciate your time. I'll let you go. I just want to say thanks a lot. And I mean, hey, look, if you have anything that you want to tell people where you're at, I've been following you. I've been noticing you for a long time. I've been in the space for nearly a decade. You've been in the space for nearly a decade. I guess actually over a decade for both of us now, which is terrifying.
I think I was late 2013, so I'm not quite there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think we're coming up on that 10-year mark. I don't know what the 10-year anniversary is, but I need to get a plaque that says I survived.
I'll be there in like November, I think, something like that.
yeah, something like that. I think for me, it was like October 2012, I think, is more or less when I got in. But yeah, all that fun stuff. But just in an interest of making sure that we get to, if people did like this and did want to reach you, just quick plugs or anything else. Thanks a lot. Very good to chat. It's good we finally were trying to find a date and we managed to get something fit in, which is interesting. And I'm always happy to have like thoughts questioned or theories on, can we do things better this way? And like we've both been in this long enough to know that things have changed a ton. So you can't just be stuck in like, you have to be willing to update and change things. Otherwise, if we were all still running the same campaigns we were running like 7-8 years ago, they would not work. That's for sure. They would not. No, we have a conversion pixel now. Like you couldn't run what you were running 9 years ago.
Yeah, when the very first, you're like, well, we run a page likes campaign and we build that up, and then you get organic reach, and things have changed a lot since those days.
Trauma from those old days.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, if people want to find my stuff, if they want to know more about, you know, what I think on Facebook, Instagram ads, then my YouTube channel is the best place. And then from there, I mentioned like website and all sorts from
Yeah, I love it. And it's just Ben Heath, right? Type it in. It's hard to miss. Simple name. It is the way you think it'd be spelled. And
yeah, it's all easy.
It's all easy. So thank you very much, man. I really do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you later. If that works for you.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks.